Welcome, everybody. You guys have good lunch? Yeah. Cool. All right. We're going to do a panel now. My name is Myrle Krantz. I'm Director of Engineering at Grafana Labs. And we have some experts here who are going to sit down and have a conversation for y'all about the second day of observability and some of the challenges and joys of the second day of observability. So people we have up here, we have Panos, we have Juraci, we have Joe, and we have Vijay. Each of them, I will ask each of them to introduce themselves. You first.
Hello, I'm Panos. I'm the Observability Platform Engineering Director for Nike. Been in this role for 3 years and really excited to talk to you all. Yeah.
I'm Juraci. I'm a former maintainer of a few modules of OpenTelemetry Collector. I started a few projects around the collector, like the operator, OCB, and so on. And since the beginning of the year, I'm operating a collector-like pipeline, ingesting OTLP data. So I'm more familiar now than even before about the challenges of running such a pipeline.
Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Knight. I work for Capital One as a senior lead software engineer on the observability team. We supply gateways and instrumentation to development teams across the enterprise.
Hello, my name is Vijay Samuel. I'm a principal architect at eBay's reliability engineering organization, and I've been working with projects like Prometheus and OpenTelemetry as an end user. Pleasure meeting you all.
So to get us started, I'm going to ask each of you to tell me one sentence, one of the challenges that you've been dealing with respect to scale, that you've been dealing with in the process of getting observability working, introduced, running in your individual contexts. So I'm going to start with Panos. You ready, Panos?
No, but we'll go for it anyway. I think for us, compute was the main driver. The costs ballooned over the last 5 years, primarily as it relates to both things that were unforeseen, like COVID, right? Suddenly our digital side at Nike grew a lot more than retail, but also because of transition from virtual machine-based compute to cloud-native workloads, which are inherently more cardinal, right? So that cost is the main thing that keeps us up at night, I suppose.
To me, the biggest challenge in ingesting OTLP data is the non-uniformity of the shape of the data. So traces, we batch them in a specific way in the collector, and the traces batches, they are kind of similar. But then when we look at the metrics batches, they are just huge. Like they're way bigger than the OTLP, like the tracing ones, and the logging for OTLP is also quite different than metrics. So I think handling a collector in a uniform way for non-uniform payloads, that's a challenge that we are facing.
Joe?
We have thousands of applications across the enterprise that are using or could use OpenTelemetry. And the way we're structured, each one of those applications has a tech team behind it. So from an observability team perspective, we're working with these teams that each are carrying like that whole adoption phase through from start to end. And we're kind of working that user education story over and over and over with each application. So it's given us an opportunity to refine that message, but that's an evolving challenge for us in adopting open source standards like OpenTelemetry.
And Vijay?
For us, it's how do we push the boundaries in terms of being able to detect, triage, mitigate, and recover faster. And a lot of that involves with bringing a lot of data at scale into the platform. And how do you do it in a standardized way? That's basically where OpenTelemetry comes in. With the scale at eBay looks like thousands of microservices, hundreds of millions of samples per second, and petabytes, tens of petabytes of logs. So it's a pretty interesting environment to be in.
So what I heard was you've got the scale of the amount of telemetry, also the scale of the number of teams that you're dealing with and change management and teaching those teams, the diversity of the data, that the data can have a wide range of formats, and total cost of ownership ballooning across a large number of, the larger the number of services you're observing, the more your CPU explodes, is what I'm hearing. So how are you all dealing with that? What are your strategies? I'm just going to go down the row again. Like what particular ways are you approaching solving these problems?
Okay, for us, we kind of face very similar problems like they were mentioned already. So what we did is we stopped trying to evangelize as much internally because we realized it's a kind of an never-ending conversation that largely depends on teams' priorities and not on how good you're in evangelizing. Rather, we decided to take control as an observability group. So please attend our KubeCon talk tomorrow about OPAMP at Nike. It's going to be pretty cool. That's how we're trying to tackle that, by introducing the OpenTelemetry collector across the board as a managed solution for us to be able to do things without necessarily either talking to people. Okay, we talk to them, but I'm saying they don't have to redeploy or do other things that they would otherwise have to do.
So that means you're using a fleet management solution? Is that, if I understood correctly?
We built
a fleet management solution in-house.
Well, using OPAMP, which is an OpenTelemetry project. Yep.
Okay. Juraci?
Yeah, I think so. The way that we are dealing with that is by not doing things at the hot path. So we are ingesting data and placing data in a message queue somewhere so that we process data later. And that's one way that we are able to ingest different shapes of data, each one with their own characteristics.
So how does that solve the problem of diversity of data?
Because at the very beginning, well, it doesn't solve that problem, but it helps us to deal with that problem with different ways, each one on their own time. So we can process traces in a specific way, and we can process metrics perhaps slower without slowing down the tracing pipeline.
Interesting. So I'm very interested in what Jonathan has to tell us about, like how you manage the problem of introducing these tools to diverse teams.
Well, so our tech teams carry their product through from like feature requirements, grooming, development, testing, validation, and then they're also responsible for monitoring, supporting all the way through the production lifecycle. So we do have to bring all of these teams up to speed with both the telemetry generation and like the monitoring and alerting on that. And while that's not particularly our team's responsibility, getting the telemetry out of the applications is. And the obvious answer, but the one that we spend most time on, is automation, right? We have to make getting auto instrumentation or even manual instrumentation into these applications a streamlined process for teams, so they can do it quickly and move on to like that later part of getting the value back out of the observability that they're baking in. So for us, that means taking what open source is producing, the collector, all the SDKs, and packaging that in our internal development and deployment tooling so that it's really easy for our tech teams to actually take advantage of it.
So it sounds like y'all's answer to the cost problem and the people problem is, in both cases, automation.
It's always automation, right? Like we're software engineers. We make the computer do the work.
Fair. So am I going to hear something similar, Vijay, when we talk about the large number of services?
We forced everyone to standardize.
Okay.
So we took a very different approach. So whether it be metrics or logs, I think there are quite a few folks I worked with in the late 2010s where we built this thing called hints-based auto discover. Anyone should be able to advertise ports that we need to scrape metrics from on their pod annotations or log files that need to be shipped via pod annotations. And that was kind of a standard. And then that allowed people to say, hey, I'm exposing in Prometheus format, I'm doing it in drop wizard format. And then we tightened it up a little more, saying that only Prometheus, nothing else. So more standardization. Then we took it a step further, saying that everyone needs to have this particular instrumentation library in all their microservices for them to get standard site operations. So that meant everyone had the same set of metrics, they had the same set of attributes when it came to tracing, and then we were able to build machine learning models on top of them, root cause analysis, automated root cause analysis on top of it, because we have the same shape of data across a variety of microservices that is there. that allows us to scale. Standardization is good, and that's the essence of OpenTelemetry as well.
So have you had any problems with standardization, like technical difficulties or people giving resistance?
There is always that one customer or a developer who's like, I am special. Are you really? So, yeah.
Okay, I'm going to guess that conversation doesn't go quite that quickly.
Yeah, over time everyone has realized the value, and now everyone feels that this is a requirement. It makes their life easy because then a standard set of folks like SREs can come in and troubleshoot any application, and it doesn't have to be paging that particular person to be able to triage. So in the grander scheme of things, it actually works well.
So when somebody says I'm special, like is there anything you can share with us about what sorts of things don't fit into your standardization?
So let's say everyone is using standard HTTP client, and someone comes in and says that I'm using Quick now. So that becomes special. Then the conversation starts as in, how can we support you as a generalized offering? How can we bake your way of developing into our standard toolkit? Then we make the special into a standard. That's how we go about widening the range of things that we can troubleshoot.
I can imagine that sometimes that also means that you push people towards more standard tools.
Right. Sometimes it's like, okay, maybe this can be done a little differently, similar to what everyone else is doing. Please try it out. If it doesn't work, then we can have the conversation of how we can support this better. But otherwise, it will make everyone's life easier if you just do this.
Has anybody else on the stage had impact on their architectures from the challenges that you've listed, from the people challenges or the TCO challenges?
I got a question for him.
Oh, yeah, please.
What kind of executive buy-in did you have to be able to do this? Like, was the CTO like a reliability leader before that told people, for the next X months, you're going to be doing this?
No, this is like observability that has happened over like several years, like
Okay.
little by little.
Good to have the context. Thank you. All right.
Good question. So I was asking about observability architecture, and I was thinking about like what kinds of, what your ingest path looks like, your instrumentation path looks like. Has there been things that you've had to adjust on that as you've confronted the challenges of scale? And it doesn't just have to be the one that you mentioned when I asked you for your one sentence. Are there any adjustments that you've had to make on your architecture as you've moved into more scale?
No, largely we deal with it the same way, as in essentially observability is an experience that comes to the teams through the CI pipelines. So that hasn't changed much, but the fleet management solution, as well as introducing pipelines, data pipelines in front of the observability backends, I think those are the main things that have happened that are different from an architectural standpoint compared to using a vendor solution or an open source solution alone.
Jonathan?
Joe.
Damn it, I said it first and I mixed it.
All good. Not to jump our talk later at 4:30 today, but that total cost has driven us into deploying the sampling collectors. And that adds a whole lot of operational complexity because now you're layering the collectors to achieve kind of the horizontal scaling needed to do sampling at scale. So that's been kind of a more recent deployment we've done to make sure that we're in control of our cost, our vendor costs, our storage costs. And that was not part of like the first rollout for OpenTelemetry.
Juraci, you looked like you wanted to say something.
No, it's very similar to what he's saying. Like he's got a second layer of collectors for sampling, and when scaling a collector pipeline, one of the things that one of the pieces of advice that I've given to people over the years is splitting by signal and then on layers. Like you do a layer here, and from that layer, very close to your application, you send data to a central collector somewhere, and perhaps that collector is central to the cluster, and then data goes out to another collector. So that architecture is influenced by the volume. Like if you don't have the volume, then you don't incur into this complexity. But if you do have the volume, then you start making decisions and at each one of those layers of collectors. And sampling is one of the decisions that you make there. So you end up having like a layer of load balancers and then another layer of samplers, and then perhaps a final one to decide, oh, dev data goes here, production data goes there. But those are the decisions that you can make at the pipeline.
Vijay, you all have been at this for a while, it sounds like, and that can have both some advantages and some disadvantages. Have there been points where you've had to change your ingested architecture? Were there challenges there because you'd been at it for a while?
Oh yeah, I think there are 5 or 6 KubeCon talks that have been done about that already. But yeah, with regards to metrics, we originally started with daemon sets, one collector per Kubernetes node. And then over time, we realized that there's way too much resource fragmentation. So we moved it into a set of collectors within a cluster, and then a controller that schedules endpoints that need to be scraped before op-amp existed. It still works for us really well, so we are continuing with that. Traces, we started with 1 tier. Eventually, we moved into 2 tiers after a lot of profiling activities and knowing what kind of a pipeline really works for us. And tail sampling, we moved off of the collector into something that's more storage-based, because traces can complete at arbitrary time periods, and holding them is very memory intensive. So that is where we came up with something that uses exemplars as a decision maker of what needs to be sampled and not sampled. So it's been a process learning to operate with growing scale and customer need.
You also mentioned profiling. That surprised me. Are you all using profiling in your observability solutions?
I think with OpenTelemetry, we are in the process of offering that to the internal teams, but this is predating all of that with the simple Go pprof and being able to analyze that.
And are the teams interested?
Of course, yeah.
Cool. Is anybody else using profiling in their telemetry signals?
The same way that he mentioned. So basically profiling the collectors when there is a problem, or when you have a bottleneck somewhere, then you take a profile or compare profiles, you make a change and you deploy and you watch the change again. But not as the telemetry that flows through the pipeline, not that.
Panos, you had an interesting question for Vijay. I'd like to pose it to everybody else on the stage too. How do you how do you communicate the value of what your observability teams are doing to other stakeholders outside, to the development teams that you're offering services to, and to executives who have to make decisions about how much to invest? I'll start with you.
Unfortunately, it's very hard to look beyond TCO as an answer to this, right? If we're being completely honest. One problem with observability as a space is that everybody talks, primarily because this hype comes from vendors, about getting your data in. But that's really not the important bit. The important bit is the analysis of the data, right? So, however, if you're an executive, you're looking at a cost item, and observability is the second highest, biggest spend in any Fortune Top 100 tech budget, right? Public cloud, of course, being the first one. So you got to have a story when you're talking to executives. You got to have a story about TCO first and foremost. Secondly, unlocking business value, that analysis piece, that is more obscure and very specific to the company context. So very hard to give you kind of guidance there. It really depends on your organization, but those are the 2 top things for me. Yeah.
Can I pose that one to you too, Joe?
Sure. Building on it, it's a very corporate or organizationally specific question to answer. So you have to figure out what is important to that organization. One thing that we have been looking at recently is the service level objective approach to measuring reliability and availability, and being able to leverage OpenTelemetry as a data source for that is another way you can kind of justify the cost in a way, beyond just the traditional alerting that you might do in a tool. But I think it really comes down to figuring out what's important to the organization, and whether the data that you need to collect can be sourced with OpenTelemetry. Because I think it's such a flexible tool that it probably can, and you can draw a line there.
So what would you be willing to or able to share what kinds of SLOs y'all are using?
Not in particular, but again, it goes back to our tech teams are all responsible for their own applications. So in many cases, it's these applications are defining their own SLOs, getting those verified, and then feeding data in with OpenTelemetry to meet those standards.
Vijay, we asked you a very similar question before, but do you also have executive buy-in that you have to win along the way?
Of course, yeah. So the organization that I'm part of, one of the big goals that we have is availability to the customer. So we have centralized observability, centralized SRE, and centralized operations. So our org primarily exists to make sure that the availability of the business is there to the customer. So part of our existence is to make sure that we are going to the teams and show them the value that this is what you would get through standardized telemetry, and this will improve the resilience of your application. And on the other side, there is also some commitment to say that, okay, 99% of all our SLOs will be compliant, and for that, they will have to have some partnership. So it's a mutual symbiotic relationship, so to speak.
I have something additional to say here. Executives, when they think about the space, they directly correlate observability with that kind of outcome, as in availability, whatever, right? The resilience organization. But I think a way for everybody here to win is to move the conversation beyond I'm just using observability so that my stuff don't break, or I'm using it to be faster when stuff breaks. How do you unlock, like we observe systems at any given time, not just when they break. So what is the kind of data that we can get out of those systems that help the business make money? It's not just about the systems breaking.
So what is the kind of data for y'all?
A very simple example, Nike does shoe drops. Anybody here knows what a shoe drop is? Great, right? Sneakerheads. So we, on Sneakers, which is an app, we launch limited availability products, right? Kobe Proton 8, super awesome, whatever, 200,000 pieces. That's a people competing to get that, unfortunately bots as well. So we use the observability system to observe the launch. So that unlocks business value, because then we can inform our decisions about, hey, maybe we should have put more orders of that shoe because it was a very popular launch, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Anybody else using observability to feed directly into business goals in this way or in similar ways? It's interesting. So I'm going to ask y'all a question about the future of OpenTelemetry. If there was something that you could have right now that would help you with some of the challenges you're dealing with in OpenTelemetry or even in the broader tool set, but let's start with OpenTelemetry. What would that be? And I'm going to start in the middle. Joe?
What a fun question. The magic wand question, I think you said. Like I said, we're really focused on bringing more applications into OpenTelemetry. And there's a lot of facets to this, but making, if I could just make auto instrumentation for Go a reality, that would be like a really easy thing for me to pick. Because when we are working with teams and we're in Java or in Python, we're in Node, auto instrumentation covers a lot of those use cases out of the box. It's a really easy story for them. Go is more tricky, and we spend a lot more time with teams that are writing Go services to get the right telemetry out of their products. And I know that there's some work happening with eBPF and some other things, but I think that would be the wish list item. If I could just appear, I'd pick.
Does that translate into more resistance to get from the Go teams to get them into the observability systems?
maybe in a timeline way, but not actually in an engineering way. I think developers want to know how their services are working, and we're giving them really good tools to do that. The only trouble is that when you're looking at level of effort, you're trying to plot out like how long will it take to get to this point? That's a longer runway when you're writing your instruments directly. So that's where we see the holdback.
We were also just talking about executive buy-in because observability is expensive, and those are expenses that you're describing. They're opportunity costs because those developers aren't working on something else. Does that do executives also complain about the additional costs of getting Go instrumented?
Well, we have just a lot of different products in a lot of different languages, but on average, it all leads to the cost of getting that telemetry. So I don't think it's necessarily a focus, but we definitely track the difference of effort for frameworks that have really good coverage with auto instrumentation versus the ones that don't.
And do you have languages that have better coverage than others? I mean, obviously Go doesn't, but other than that?
I mean, it always depends on the framework as well. So just because you have auto instrumentation for a language doesn't mean that it's going to work perfectly. Actually, in a lot of cases, you miss out on specific aspects. But I'd say if you had to pick the golden standard, like Java works really well because a lot of people write their applications in Spring. It's very reasonable to use like AOP to get a lot of good instrumentation out of that. It's just a very predictable environment, so we have a better estimate for instrumentation effort when we go look at a Java Spring app than we do, a Node app or especially jumping over into Go.
Vijay, do you also have any wishes that you could give to the OpenTelemetry community? Is there like one thing that if you had this thing, it would make a big difference?
I think as a community, we have come a long way in bringing data into the corresponding platforms, whether it be open source or vendor products or whatnot. I think the next big push, whether it is in the scope of OpenTelemetry or not, is secondary, but bringing data out is where we should really invest in standardized query languages for observability. If we had that, then I think doing a lot of complicated things would be a lot more possible. And yes, folks do say that, you can use LLMs to generate these queries in whatever language, but there is a cost associated with using LLMs for this purpose. We need standardized query languages.
And PromQL doesn't do it?
What about logs, traces, profiles, across the board?
So I'm not sure OpenTelemetry is going to agree that belongs in their scope. I
know,
see Juraci, who's also on the GC with this look in his face.
A wish is a wish.
A wish is a wish. I did ask for a wish.
I mean, if I could just magic one, right? So 0 overhead, 0 effort, perfect observability with a query language. Yes, of course. Why not?
So you now have a wish, Juraci, and you better be careful because you may be the one fulfilling it.
No, I guess I would go with Joe as well. But with one change. Instead of auto instrumentation, I would go for manual instrumentation. If I could have a button that just says, I want to instrument this application here, this Go application here, just go and instrument it for me. I think that's the ideal world. If we have a something that can get that done, I think that's my thing for the future, perhaps.
And Panos, I think you have the last word here. You get the last wish. That's powerful.
I agree with Vijay that for observability, not OpenTelemetry, right? It's probably out of scope, but for observability, the real push should be on the analysis side, not on the instrumentation side. A lot has been said and done there. For OpenTelemetry, I'm not going to say OPAMP because that's obvious. We'll talk about it tomorrow. I'll say OTel is where I would love to see that becoming more than what it currently is. It's a great thing, but it the amount of technical data we have on log transformation and metric transformation and stuff like that in the enterprise is staggering, right? I mean, you guys know the volume. It's crazy. So we need better ways to do OTTL in large-scale enterprise environments. Like, there is no way I'm going to OTTL all the things we have on Cribble or Splunk. It's just never going to happen. It's going to take like 50 years to do it. So I maybe LLMs is the answer. I don't know, governing committee, but like I need better ways to do this at scale, or maybe a UI.
I think LLMs always need tools themselves. So any LLM answer is going to require another tool that the LLM is using. So I do believe that we have reached time. Oh, we've got about 2 minutes. Does anybody in the room have questions that they would like to share, that they'd like to ask the panelists?
Dan?
You told more about all your organizations are basically enabling the rest of your teams to be more productive. Without responsibility comes, without power comes responsibility. Can you share a bit more about the compliance and governance that you put in place to ensure that they produce good telemetry that they basically charge to get ROI?
Let me repeat the question so that everybody can hear it. Do your teams have any strategies for applying governance to because you have a lot of power over, potentially a lot of power over the teams that you're serving? Is there any way that you help them, that there's governance that you apply in your cases?
I don't want to go first.
Joe?
I'll jump in. I can't go into specifics, but we've kind of built a handbook of sorts with a tiered model for what you should be monitoring. This is designed to hit a specific common case and then start down the path for our more still common, but maybe specific to application purpose, and socialize that with our SRE teams and make that common resource that we set as the expectation for teams instrumenting their applications.
Vijay?
We have documents that are out there on best practices with regards to instrumentation, and our SREs reach out to teams and provide them guidance or even code on doing the right level of instrumentation. Beyond that, as a platform provider, we basically have guardrails, cardinality rate limits, after which a certain tenant will get cut off, endpoint size limit based monitoring, where beyond a certain size, we don't scrape the endpoint anymore, tail sampling, head sampling, all these things to make sure that the platform itself is protected as well.
Okay, so this is a culture-heavy question, right? So we have documents too, but as Bob can tell you, nobody respects them. So if your organization has the programmatic tools in place to guide the actual pipeline that you can enforce governance to, great. We did not. That's kind of OPAM came into the picture, but we'll talk about that tomorrow. So what we have in place is a minimum set of metrics and labels related to the minimum viable consumer journey. So if your metric name has to do, for example, with a user ID, whatever, it needs to look a certain way, top to bottom, to cover the entire digital experience. So at least we can ask a uniform set of questions on that data.
All right, y'all. I'm going to wrap it up here. I wanted to thank Panos, Juraci, Joe, and Vijay for joining us. And if y'all have questions, you can also ask us afterwards. I hope you enjoy the rest of your observability day.
There's a slide with the feedback.